With all its beauty, the ocean is a realm where the balance between life and death can change in the blink of an eye. Even the most experienced surfers can fall victim to the dangers lurking beneath its surface. Among these predators, few are as fearsome as the great white shark. Today, we share the harrowing story of an ocean enthusiast whose peaceful beach stroll took a terrifying turn. Eloise Grant walked the quiet shores of a North Carolina beach, seeking solace in nature's embrace. The stretch of sand was usually empty, save for the occasional bird or crab, and today seemed no different, until she noticed a dark mass on the shoreline ahead. As she approached, her pulse quickened. A massive great white shark lay motionless on the sand, its rough gray skin shimmering in the sunlight. Eloise had only seen sharks from a distance, their fins cutting through the water. This one was enormous up close, its gaping mouth revealing rows of sharp teeth gleaming despite the sand. Apprehensive but intrigued, Eloise stepped closer. The shark appeared to have washed ashore during the night, a victim of the ocean's currents. As she neared its open mouth, something caught her eye. A metallic glint nestled within the shark's throat. Curiosity overpowered caution. Eloise crouched beside the creature, spotting a small, intricately engraved box lodged inside. What could a metallic box be doing inside a shark? Her hand trembled as she reached into the shark's cavernous mouth, brushing the cold surface of its teeth, inching toward the strange object. The metal was cool to the touch, and as her fingers wrapped around it, she realized how small the box was, no more significant than the palm of her hand. She tugged gently, feeling the object's weight give slightly as it loosened from its position. It took more effort than she had anticipated, the box seemingly wedged in place by the shark's throat. With one final pull, she freed the box, and a soft clink echoed inside as she did. She held it in her hand, examining the intricate engravings that covered its surface, symbols she didn't recognize, worn and weathered by time. Her heartbeat quickened as she marveled at the object, wondering where it had come from and what it might contain. She turned the box over, inspecting it closely. Just as she considered opening it, the shark's eyes flickered open. It happened so quickly that Eloise barely had time to react. One moment, the great white lay still and lifeless on the sand, its empty gaze fixed on the horizon. The next, its body jerked with sudden terrifying violence. The shark's massive jaws snapped shut with a force that sent a shockwave of pain up Eloise's arm. She screamed in silence, her voice stolen by the terror that gripped her as the shark's teeth clamped down around her forearm. The pain was instant and excruciating, a sharp, searing sensation that ripped through her flesh as the serrated teeth sank deep into her skin. Blood poured from the wound, staining the sand in a dark, spreading pool. Instinct took over, her body reacting to the primal need to survive. She yanked her arm, trying desperately to free herself from the shark's powerful jaws. But the beast's grip was unrelenting, its teeth like iron traps, holding her in place as it thrashed violently on the sand. The creature's body convulsed, its tail slapping against the ground with a force that sent tremors through the earth. Eloise fought desperately, her free hand clawing at the sand as the shark dragged her toward the water. Pain clouded her vision, and panic set in, as the once lifeless shark now moved with a terrifying force. She kicked and thrashed, but the more she struggled, the tighter the shark's jaws clamped around her arm. Its jagged teeth tore into her flesh, shredding muscle and bone. The metallic box she had found still weighed heavily in her grasp, a bitter reminder of the curiosity that had led her to this horrific moment. She tried to fling it away, but her strength was fading, her hand numb from pain. The shark's eyes, dead yet full of a strange hunger, sent chills down her spine as it pulled her closer to the sea. Eloise's strength was nearly gone, the cold waves lapping at her feet as the ocean seemed ready to claim her. With a final desperate surge of energy, she wrenched her arm free. The shark's teeth tore through her skin, leaving her arm mangled and bleeding, but she was free. She scrambled away from the creature, her body trembling with shock. The shark thrashed in the shallow water before finally growing still, its massive body lying lifeless once again. Eloise collapsed on the sand, her chest heaving, her arm a torn, bloody mess. A passerby found her and rushed her to the hospital. Though she later lost her arm, Eloise survived her ordeal, now a story she would tell for the rest of her life. The fishing boat rocked violently on towering waves off the coast of Chile. What began as a calm day had quickly devolved into a nightmare. Dark clouds loomed overhead, and the once blue waters had turned into a menacing green. Still, the crew pressed on, determined not to return empty-handed. Vicente Moraga stood at the bow, gripping the railing as the wind tore at him. He'd experienced rough seas before, but today felt different, unnatural. Unease gnawed at him, though the rest of the crew seemed focused on their task. As the boat dipped between waves, the captain ordered them to start hauling in the nets. Vicente, Sebastian, and Joaquin heaved the heavy nets from the sea, straining against the weight. The swells grew more significant, and the boat lurched violently. Vicente felt an unusual tremor in the line as they pulled the catch closer. He exchanged a worried glance with Sebastian. Suddenly, the net jerked violently, yanking them forward. For a moment, Vicente thought they'd hooked a whale, but what surfaced was far worse. A massive shape surged from the depths, a giant squid, its enormous tentacles writhing in the air. Vicente's heart froze as the monstrous creature reached for the boat, its slimy mottled skin glistening in the stormy light. The boat shuddered as a tentacle wrapped around the bow with a sickening suction. Chaos erupted. Crew members scattered, shouting warnings as the squid's limbs slammed into the deck. Vicente was thrown to the ground, gasping for breath as the boat tipped closer to the sea. The squid's cold black eyes watched them with terrifying intelligence, pulling the ship into the stormy depths. Vicente struggled, grabbing a nearby harpoon and lunging toward one of the tentacles. He drove the weapon into the thick, rubbery flesh, but the creature barely flinched. Another tentacle swept across the deck, knocking Vicente aside once more as the squid continued its assault. The boat groaned under the pressure, its hull creaking ominously as it was pulled deeper into the water. One crew, Ignacio, was frantically cutting at the netting with a knife, trying to free the boat from the heavy tangle of lines that had attracted the squid in the first place. But his efforts were slow, hampered by the violent rocking of the boat and the constant threat of the squid's thrashing limbs. Another tentacle lashed out, slamming into Ignacio and sending him sprawling. He scrambled back, narrowly avoiding the suction cups that grazed the deck where he had fallen. The storm worsened, with the wind howling around them and rain pelting their faces as they fought to hold their ground. The squid's grip tightened, pulling the ship lower into the churning waters, and it was clear the boat wouldn't last much longer under the immense strain. Vicente's muscles screamed in protest as he grabbed hold of another harpoon, aiming for the squid's massive body as it hovered beneath the surface. He drove the weapon downward with all his strength, but the sea monster was too large, too powerful. Another tentacle shot toward him, wrapping around his leg in a split second. Vicente's world spun as he was yanked off his feet and pulled toward the boat's edge. He clawed desperately at the deck, his hands slipping on the wet wood as the creature's suction cups adhered to his skin. At that moment, his mind raced, the terror of being pulled into the black, unforgiving depths overwhelming him. He could feel the immense strength of the squid as it tightened its grip, lifting him into the air. The crew shouted in alarm, but there was little they could do as the monster began to drag him overboard. Vicente's breath came in short gasps as he fought to free himself, his hands slipping, his grip weakening. The sea roared below him, waves crashing against the boat's sides as he was pulled toward the cold, dark water. For a fleeting moment he felt weightless as the ship disappeared from under him, the tentacle lifting him clear of the deck. Then, with a sickening jolt, he plunged into the ocean, the freezing water closing over his head. The squid's hold was unrelenting. Its tentacle wrapped tightly around his leg, dragging him deeper into the abyss. The dark and thick water swallowed him whole as the surface receded above. His lungs burned, and pressure built in his chest as the creature pulled him down with terrifying speed. Through the haze of bubbles and murk, Vicente could make out the shadow of the squid's enormous body, its beak looming closer. He thrashed wildly, his hands tearing at the tentacle that held him, but it was useless. The creature's strength was too great, its grip too tight. Panic surged through him as his vision blurred, the darkness closing in from all sides. Above, the boat was just a shadow, and the other crew members were faint silhouettes. The crushing weight of the water bore down on him, and Vicente felt his energy slipping away. The squid's massive beak was just inches from him now, opening wide, ready to engulf him whole. His vision dimmed, and for a moment he thought it was over. Amidst the storm and chaos, a flash of light broke through the surface. The boat, though half submerged, wasn't entirely lost. The crew fought fiercely, hacking at the squid's tentacles with knives and harpoons. The creature recoiled in pain, loosening its grip just enough for Vicente to break free. With what strength he had left, Vicente kicked toward the surface. His limbs felt leaden, but he pushed upward, desperate for air. Breaking through the waves, he gasped, the storm raging around him. The boat was listing dangerously, but he swam toward it, his body numb from exhaustion. Hands pulled him up onto the deck, where the crew had managed to fend off the worst attack. The squid's massive body retreated into the depths, and its tentacles slipped beneath the waves. Though the storm still howled, the immediate danger had passed. Vicente lay gasping on the deck, the terror of the encounter still gripping him. That day, the sea had revealed one of its darkest secrets, a reminder of the ruthless power lurking beneath its surface. The ocean was mysterious and dangerous, and they had barely escaped its grasp. The sun gleamed over the clear waters of New Zealand, casting a brilliant reflection on the surface. Beneath, 5 divers descended into an underwater world, exploring a vast kelp forest swaying gently with the ocean currents. The towering kelp stalks reached upward toward the filtered sunlight, creating a stunning underwater jungle. The divers moved silently, captivated by the serene beauty around them, vivid greens and golds of the kelp contrasting with the deep blues beyond. Fish darted through the forest, their scales glimmering in the light as the divers swam in sync, breathing steady, their bubbles rising in rhythmic bursts. Unbeknownst to them, a lone orca was watching. Just beyond the forest's edge, the orca swam silently, its sleek black and white body cutting effortlessly through the water. It had been tracking the group for some time, its keen senses alert to their presence. The orca's curiosity was piqued, its massive dorsal fin slicing through the depths like a blade. It circled them, watching from a distance, occasionally surfacing closer, its presence hidden by the dense kelp. One diver, Cedric, lingered at the edge of the kelp forest, gazing at the open ocean, unaware of the lurking danger. The orca, growing more predatory, inched closer. Suddenly, the whale struck. It surged from the depths with lightning speed and rammed into Cedric with tremendous force. The impact sent him hurtling backward into the kelp, his body crashing into the thick stalks, pain and confusion overwhelming him. Tangled in the kelp, Cedric struggled as his vision blurred, the tranquil beauty of the dive shattered by the brutal attack. The other divers noticed the disturbance immediately and turned toward the source of the chaos. They saw Cedric's body tumbling through the kelp, and then they saw it, the massive black and white shape of the orca circling just beyond. Panic set in as they realized what was happening. One diver, a woman named Ilona, reached out, trying to swim toward Cedric, but the whale cut her off with a swift flick of its tail, sending her spinning away. The orca's behavior had shifted entirely. No longer curious, it was now hunting. The ocean, once peaceful, had transformed into a battleground, the kelp forest offering little protection from the predator that lurked just beyond its edges. The divers, once mesmerized by the beauty of the underwater world, now found themselves trapped, their movements slow and cumbersome as they struggled against the current and the dense kelp. Cedric fought to regain control of his body, the pain in his chest making it difficult to breathe. His vision cleared enough to see the whale circling nearby, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a knife. He kicked his legs, trying to free himself from the kelp, but the stalks wrapped around him, holding him in place as if the forest itself had conspired against him. The other divers did their best to regroup, but the orca was relentless. It moved with terrifying precision, herding them deeper into the kelp forest, isolating them individually. Each time a diver attempted to ascend or break free, the whale would strike, its body colliding with theirs, sending them spinning back into the tangled mass of kelp. The orca's movements were almost methodical, as if it was playing a deadly game. It would disappear into the shadows, only to reappear moments later, charging at the divers with shocking speed and force. Its immense size and power made it nearly impossible to predict, and the dense kelp obscured their vision, making it difficult to see the whale until it was too late. Ilona was the next to be targeted. She had managed to break free from the group and was swimming toward the surface, her movements frantic as she tried to escape the orca's reach. But the whale was faster. It surged upward, ramming into her with such force that she was knocked unconscious, her body sinking slowly back into the kelp. The other divers watched in horror, powerless to stop the attack. The orca picked them off individually, its predatory instincts fully engaged. Once a sanctuary, the kelp forest had become a prison, the dense fronds hindering their every movement. The divers struggled to stay together, but the whale's attacks were too precise and brutal. It seemed to anticipate their every move, cutting them off before they could ascend and driving them deeper into the tangled mass of kelp. Still trapped in the kelp, Cedric could only watch as the whale continued its assault. His mind raced, searching for a way out, but his body was weak. The impact of the initial attack left him disoriented and struggling for breath. He could feel the weight of the ocean pressing down on him, the kelp wrapping tighter around his limbs as he fought to stay conscious. The orca was relentless. It circled the remaining divers, its massive body gliding through the water with a terrifying grace. It was a perfect predator, perfectly adapted to this environment, and the divers were nothing more than prey in its eyes. Once serene and inviting, the ocean had turned into a nightmare, and the divers' only hope of survival was now a distant memory. As the orca made its final pass, Cedric knew it was over. His body was too weak to fight, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The whale's dark form loomed above him, its eyes locked onto its target. With a final burst of speed, the orca struck, its body colliding with Cedric's, sending him into the depths of the kelp forest where the light of the surface could no longer reach. The water grew still once more. The kelp swayed gently in the current, and the ocean returned to its peaceful rhythm. The divers, now separated and scattered throughout the forest, floated silently in the water, their bodies motionless, the threat of the orca lurking just beyond the forest's edge. The humid air of the Amazon rainforest hung heavy as the tourists traveled along a narrow trail leading to a secluded lagoon. The guide, a seasoned local named Florencio, walked ahead of the group, expertly maneuvering through the thick foliage, his sharp machete slicing through the occasional vine blocking their path. Florencio had led countless expeditions through the Amazon, always eager to share its wonders. Today's excursion promised an immersive experience, a guided swimming tour in one of the many tranquil lagoons that dotted the vast rainforest. The tourists, a mix of excited and curious adventurers, ranged from seasoned travelers to those experiencing the wild beauty of the Amazon for the first time. Among them was Ezekiel, a wiry and cautious traveler from the southern Andes. His curiosity had driven him to join the group despite his reservations about swimming in the unknown waters. However, the calm surface of the lagoon lulled him into a sense of false security. Its glassy reflection mirrored the surrounding trees and sky. It seemed serene, untouched by the dangers the Amazon was notorious for. Florencio stopped at the lagoon's edge, gesturing to the tourists to set down their gear. He spoke in a calm, authoritative voice, though the language barrier between him and some of the group made his words feel distant. Yet his gestures were precise. Stay close, calm, and enjoy the experience. One by one, the tourists began to wade into the water, its cool touch a relief from the oppressive heat. Ezekiel hesitated at the riverbank, his feet sinking into the soft, silty sand. He watched as others ventured deeper into the water, laughing and splashing, their joy infectious. The lagoon appeared deceptively shallow, and Ezekiel found himself reassured by the presence of the guide. If anything were to go wrong, surely Florencio would handle it. The group swam lazily, enjoying the refreshing water as they marveled at the dense canopy above. It was easy to forget the dangers lurking in the Amazon. The rainforest beauty was overwhelming, intoxicating in its vibrancy and life. Birds sang from unseen perches, and the distant calls of monkeys echoed through the trees. Yet beneath the water's surface, unnoticed and silent, something was stirring. Ezekiel had just begun to relax when he felt an unsettling sensation. At first it was subtle, a faint disturbance beneath his feet as he floated near the center of the lagoon. His heart quickened, though he couldn't immediately identify why. He scanned the water's surface, now rippling slightly as if something significant was moving below. It was probably just a fish, he reasoned. The Amazon was full of aquatic life, and it wasn't uncommon to see creatures darting about below the water's surface. But then he saw a shadow larger than any fish gliding slowly beneath him. His breath caught in his throat as he realized this was no ordinary animal. It moved with a purpose, its form indistinct but unmistakably massive. He froze, his body tense, hoping it would pass without incident. The water exploded. A monstrous creature, ancient and powerful, surged from the murky depths with terrifying speed. Its massive jaws, lined with rows of jagged teeth, clamped down on Ezekiel's leg before he could react. The shock of the attack was immediate. Pain shot through his body as the crocodile's teeth pierced deep into his flesh. The creature's rough scales scraped against his skin as it jerked violently, pulling him underwater in a swift and savage motion. Standing on the shore, Florencio had seen the attack unfold in a heartbeat. Without hesitation, he plunged into the water, his heart racing as he swam towards Ezekiel. But the lagoon had turned into a churning mess of splashing limbs and mud, the once calm surface now disturbed by the thrashing struggle between man and beast. The other tourists, paralyzed by shock, could only watch as the crocodile dragged Ezekiel deeper, its immense strength unmatched by anything they had ever witnessed. The water turned a murky brown as silt and blood mixed beneath the surface. Ezekiel fought with everything he had, his arms flailing wildly in a desperate attempt to free himself. His lungs burned as he struggled to stay above water. But the crocodile was relentless. Each tug from the beast pulled him further into the lagoon, its powerful tail propelling it with frightening speed. Florencio reached Ezekiel just as the crocodile pulled him under once more. The guide grabbed the man's arm, pulling with all his might. The battle was one of pure survival. Florencio knew that time was running out. Crocodiles were apex predators, built to outlast their prey in a deadly dance of endurance and strength. But he couldn't let go. He refused to allow the crocodile to claim another life. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Ezekiel might break free. His head broke the surface, gasping for air as he thrashed against the reptile's grip. But the crocodile, sensing the resistance, twisted its massive body in a death roll, spinning violently in the water. The motion was designed to tear apart its prey, and Ezekiel's leg buckled under the force. The pain was excruciating. Bone snapping echoed in the murky silence beneath the water. Florencio felt the shift in the water, the sheer power of the crocodile as it executed its lethal maneuver. His grip on Ezekiel began to falter, the man's body slipping from his grasp. Desperation clawed at the guide's mind. He needed a weapon, something to drive the beast away, but the chaotic struggle left him with no options. His fists pounded against the crocodile's armored hide, but it was futile. The animal's skin was as tough as the ancient logs littered the jungle floor. The tourists, paralyzed by fear, began to panic. Some swam frantically toward the shore, while others stood in the shallows, frozen and unsure. The once peaceful lagoon had turned into a scene of chaos. Ezekiel's body went limp as exhaustion and shock overwhelmed him. The crocodile dragged him further down, and Florencio, realizing the futility of his efforts, was forced to let go. The predator vanished into the murky depths, leaving only the distant jungle sounds behind. The remaining pale and trembling tourists gathered on the shore, their faces marked by horror. The lagoon, once inviting, now felt ominous, a stark reminder of nature's hidden dangers. Florencio emerged from the water, shaken by the weight of his failure. He scanned the depths, but Ezekiel was gone, replaced by the tranquil ripples of the lagoon. The crocodile had triumphed. As the group stood in stunned silence, the Amazon continued its rhythmic life. Birds sang and the wind whispered through the trees. The lagoon surface, now serene, belied the recent horror. Florencio knew the crocodile likely watched from the depths, waiting for another chance. The traumatized group would need to be guided to safety, forever marked by their encounter with the ruthless force of the wild. The luxurious yacht gleamed under the Mediterranean sun, gracefully slicing through the sparkling waters. Its gleaming deck reflected the affluence of its owner, Bastian Marnell, a prominent businessman. Accompanied by his wife Alara and their two children, Callum and Aris, Bastian had spared no expense for this summer getaway. They were savoring a serene escape from their high-profile lives. basking in the yacht's luxury and the beauty of the calm Mediterranean. The yacht was a marvel of modern luxury, outfitted with the latest technology and staffed by a top-notch crew led by the seasoned Captain Marcos. They had been enjoying a peaceful voyage, exploring secluded coves and relishing the tranquility of the sea. However, the calm began to falter as the sun descended, casting a golden hue over the water. The gentle waves grew irregular, and the water took on a darker, murkier hue. Captain Marcos, with decades of experience, sensed something was amiss. The crew noticed the change too. The yacht began to rock with increasing intensity, and a low, primal hum resonated through the hull, accompanied by a pungent odor of decay. The water ahead started to churn, forming whirlpools that disrupted the once clear surface. Captain Marcos ordered the yacht to slow down, scanning for signs of an approaching storm or danger, but the skies were clear, and the wind was steady. Then, a large and unnatural shadow moved beneath the surface. It grew more defined as it approached, and the crew's unease turned to palpable fear. Without warning, the yacht jolted violently as though struck from below. Bastian grabbed the railing to steady himself while Alara clutched her children, her heart racing. The crew scrambled to secure loose equipment, but their efforts were futile as another, more powerful jolt caused the yacht to list dangerously. From the depths, it emerged, a colossal serpentine creature. Its dark, scaly body was covered in barnacles and seaweed, suggesting it had been lurking in the ocean's abyss for ages. It rose with terrifying speed and force, its jagged spined head casting a massive shadow over the deck. The creature's enormous and cold eyes gleamed with alien intelligence, and its gaping maw revealed rows of menacing, needle-like teeth, each the length of a man's arm. The yacht and its occupants were now face to face with a primordial terror from the deep, their serene escape shattered by the ancient power of the sea. The sea serpent lashed out, its massive tail whipping through the water, sending waves crashing against the side of the yacht. The impact was tremendous, causing the yacht to tilt precariously. Crew members were thrown off their feet, sliding across the deck as the yacht groaned under the strain. The creature's thick and muscular body coiled around the yacht's midsection, squeezing with unimaginable force. Wood and metal creaked and cracked under the pressure, and the yacht began to tilt even further. Bastian, his mind racing, grabbed a nearby life vest and strapped it to Alara, urging her toward the safety of the yacht's lower deck. But there was no safety to be found. The creature's grip tightened, and the yacht's hull buckled. The deck tilted sharply, sending equipment and furniture sliding toward the railing. Callum and Aris clung to their mother, their young faces pale with terror. The serpent's massive head lowered toward the deck, jaws snapping at anything in its path. One of the crew, attempting to secure a lifeboat, was caught in its teeth. There was a sickening crunch as the man was lifted from the deck, disappearing into the serpent's maw. Blood splattered across the polished surface of the yacht, and the crew's panic escalated. The monster's hunger was insatiable, and it seemed intent on dragging the entire vessel, and everyone aboard, into the depths. The captain, shouting orders to his remaining crew, scrambled to the engine room. He hoped to restart the engine somehow and steer the yacht toward shallower waters, but the serpent's grip made movement nearly impossible. The once pristine yacht now listed dangerously to one side, the deck at a steep angle, and the creature showed no signs of releasing its hold. Another violent lurch sent Bastian crashing into the railing, his body teetering on the edge before he managed to pull himself back. He could see the serpent's cold and calculating eyes as it surveyed its prey. This wasn't a simple feeding. It was a deliberate attack, as though the creature had waited centuries for this moment, for a vessel to cross its path and challenge its domain. The yacht's hull groaned again, louder this time as the serpent's coils constricted further. Water began to seep in through the lower decks, and the crew's efforts to repel the creature with fire extinguishers and flares did little to slow its advance. The yacht was sinking, pulled down inch by inch as the serpent tightened its grip. As the yacht tilted further, the family found themselves clinging to the railing, desperately trying to avoid slipping into the water below, where the serpent's tail thrashed violently. The crew, now reduced in number, fought bravely, but it was clear that the yacht wouldn't last much longer. The ancient predator, seemingly invulnerable to their efforts, continued its relentless assault. Suddenly, the serpent's tail lashed out again, striking the yacht with a force that sent a deep crack along the hull. The yacht shuddered, its structural integrity finally giving way. Water flooded the lower decks, and the vessel began to sink faster, the bow dipping into the sea. The serpent's coils loosened momentarily as it shifted its body, preparing for the final strike. Tired with exhaustion and fear, Bastian realized they had no options. The yacht was doomed, and the serpent showed no mercy. He glanced at Ilara, her eyes wide with terror, and then at his children, clinging to her. At that moment, a single thought consumed him: survival. As the yacht sank lower, the serpent's head rose once more, preparing to finish what it had started. Its jaws opened wide, poised to strike. The final moment was upon them. With one last violent lurch, the yacht gave in to the depths, dragged down by the weight of the serpent's coils. The family, crew, and vessel vanished beneath the surface, leaving only the echo of a monstrous legend in their wake. The Mediterranean returned to its serene state, the sea serpent retreating to the deep, waiting patiently for its next victim. The day was tailor-made for a surfing competition on the Pacific Ocean that had drawn an international crowd to the pristine shores of a coastal Australian town. The competitors were out in force, the sleek lines of their boards cutting through the waves with precision as they maneuvered for position, eyeing the building swell in anticipation of the next set of perfect waves. Out in the water, Hayden Corrigan, a seasoned competitor, paddled with confident, rhythmic strokes. His chestnut hair slicked back beneath the bright sun. His tan skin glistened with salt water. Hayden had been riding waves since he was old enough to walk and knew these waters like the back of his hand. There was electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation for what would surely be a spectacular showdown among the world's best surfers. As Hayden waited for the next set, his board bobbing with the rolling swells, he scanned the lineup of competitors, nodding to familiar faces, each person focused on the waves. None realized that a silent danger was moving beneath the surface, hidden in the deep azure currents. Far offshore, a bloom of Portuguese man-o'-war jellyfish had been carried toward the coastline by a shifting current. They were nearly invisible from above, their translucent blue and purple bodies blending seamlessly with the water. Their long, venomous tentacles stretched beneath them, drifting like an invisible web of death, hundreds of feet in some cases, waiting to brush against anything in their path. The competitors remained oblivious, focusing solely on the next set of waves. As the minutes ticked by, the shifting current brought the bloom closer and closer to the surf zone, the gentle lapping of the water masking the growing threat. Lifeguards perched in towers scanned the surface, eyes trained for sharks or rip currents. But the danger they needed to spot was far more insidious. The day's heat continued to climb, and the surfers paddled more profoundly into the surf zone, eager to catch the next wave. Hayden found himself further out than most, wanting to position himself right for the incoming set. He squinted against the sun's glare as the water around him seemed to still, a brief lull before the wave began to form. He took a deep breath, mentally preparing to ride it. But something unexpected happened, just as the wave began to rise behind him. The water around Hayden seemed to tighten, an almost imperceptible change in how his board floated, as if the ocean had shifted in mood. He dipped his hand into the water, feeling the cool liquid slip between his fingers. A sudden and sharp sting lanced up his arm. It was followed almost instantly by another, a searing pain that made his muscles clench. Hayden gasped, yanking his arm from the water, but it was too late. The evil tentacles of the Portuguese man-o'-war had wrapped around his arm and leg, the near-invisible filaments adhering to his skin like barbed wire. He felt the fire spread through his body in a vicious cascade, a heat so intense that his nerves had been set ablaze. His heart raced, panic rising in his chest as the realization of what was happening took hold. He tried to paddle away, desperate to free himself from the unseen predator. But every movement only tightened the tentacles and spread the venom more rapidly. His muscles began to seize, cramping uncontrollably as the toxin invaded his nervous system. His breath came in short, shallow gasps as the pain became unbearable, a hot iron brand burning its way through his flesh. Hayden's vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges of his sight. Once powerful and sure, his arms felt weak, almost numb as though his body was betraying him in his time of greatest need. He tried to scream, but his throat was too tight, the air refusing to come. His board flipped beneath him as he lost control, and for a moment he was submerged in the water, the cool embrace of the ocean a brief respite from the fire in his veins. On shore, the lifeguards saw the commotion, Hayden's sudden flailing in the water. One guard raised a flag, signaling for backup, as another grabbed a board and sprinted toward the surf. The crowd began to murmur in confusion, watching as the guard paddled furiously toward the fallen surfer. But as the lifeguard neared, he saw the true extent of the danger. Surrounding Hayden, and now spreading through the surf zone, were dozens, perhaps hundreds of Portuguese man-o'-war, their menacing tentacles trailing in the current like deadly ribbons. The lifeguard slowed, realizing the peril he was paddling into. Even as he tried to reach Hayden, he knew he had to avoid the tentacles, each brush with them capable of causing a similar fate to the one already gripping the top competitor. He could see Hayden struggling, though his movements were growing more sluggish, the venom quickly sapping his strength. The lifeguard's heart pounded in his chest as he maneuvered closer, trying to find a path through the minefield of jellyfish. On shore, the event organizers were in complete panic mode. Sirens blared as they scrambled to call off the competition, waving flags and whistling to get the other surfers out of the water. But the warning was coming too late. Several other competitors had already paddled into the danger zone, unaware of the invisible threat beneath them. One by one, the cries of pain began to echo across the water as more surfers were stung, their bodies convulsing in agony as the venom took hold. The scene quickly turns into chaos. The lifeguards were overwhelmed, trying to rescue multiple surfers while avoiding the ever-growing jellyfish bloom. Hayden, barely conscious now, was being dragged by the currents further into the heart of the bloom, his body limp and unresponsive. His breathing was shallow, the venom wreaking havoc on his nervous system, causing paralysis to creep up his limbs. For those still in the water, every paddle was fraught with peril. Jellyfish were everywhere, their delicate balloon-like bodies bobbing innocuously on the surface, while their venomous tendrils stretched out in deadly webs below. The water had become a battlefield, where every stroke could mean the difference between life and excruciating death. The event organizers finally ordered a complete evacuation, but it was clear that not everyone would make it out unscathed. The remaining surfers who hadn't been stung paddled furiously for shore, some abandoning their boards entirely in a desperate bid to escape. Lifeguards pulled several competitors from the water, their bodies writhing in pain, skin marked with red welts where the tentacles had made contact. By the time they reached Hayden, it was too late. His body floated face down in the water, carried by the gentle current as the jellyfish drifted around him, their venom still coursing through his veins. The lifeguard who reached him pulled him onto his board, but there was no response. Hayden's body was limp, his skin pale and cold, the fire of life extinguished by the deadly sting of the ocean's silent killer. On the shore, medics rushed to treat the injured, applying vinegar and trying to keep the victims calm as they fought against the crippling pain. But for Hayden and several others, the rescue had come too late. Instead, the competition that had promised glory became a tragic reminder of nature's unpredictability and how quickly unseen forces could steal life away.